What impresses me most about psychological thrillers is how much they are centered around the characters, their motivations, thoughts, and behavior. Second Sight is a game that pulls you in immediately. Right from the get-go, we are placed into the fractured mind of our protagonist, John Vatic, a battered, groggy, bewildered man who, after waking up in a medical research facility, has no memory of who he is or why he's been detained. When considering his scarred and bandaged body, we can infer he's been subjected to a traumatic surgery and experimentation. The mystery deepens when Vatic learns he has psychic powers. The first of many is his telekinesis, which he discovers while attempting to break out of his cell. Remarkably, he's able to unlock the door panel from the other side of the glass, and soon realizes he can fry computers, lift objects, and throw them at people, all without touching them. The first stage, Isolation, serves as a brief tutorial level of sorts, letting the player practice with Vatic's newfound telekinetic abilities to scare away the guards, before slipping into an elevator to get away. Here, the game introduces an interesting narrative device, where another, intertwined parallel story is presented. While peering at his reflection, Vatic suddenly experiences a flashback to 6 months ago. In this time, he's shown to have hair and is dressed more decently. Basically, in nearly every other level, you'll be jumping backwards through time to explore the protagonist's involvement in a secret mission to uncover the paranormal workings of a scientist in Russia. Every time Vatic remembers a piece of his past, the player experiences these recollections as fully playable episodes. The way the game makes use of gameplay and cutscenes, depicted in both time periods, helps nurture a genuine desire to figure out what the hell is going on. Second Sight offers a gripping mystery through shocking events that takes place in the present, and then proceeds to provide answers to that mystery by feeding you with snippets of backstory. The premise is simple. You play the role of a damaged amnesiac and must set out to unearth the truth as to how he ended up in this sorry state, pursued relentlessly by private security forces. Yet despite its simple premise, the method by which the game structures its tightly woven dual narrative is captivating. It keeps you motivated to play right through to the end, and by the time we reach those closing moments, I can say unequivocally that it's all worth it. Second Sight rewards you with one of the best reveals in gaming history. There's a creative twist ending, one that certainly caught me by surprise, and something that I haven't seen done in fiction before. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that it's worth playing for that alone. But before we dive into the ending and all it entails, I want to first talk about how the opening chapters explore Vatic's character. In early flashbacks, we learn Dr. John Vatic is a scientist who studied at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's dedicated his life's work to investigating the credibility of parapsychology, or in other words, psychic phenomena. He's not a big fan of psychics, believing them to be frauds. As he puts it, he debunks psychics, he doesn't confirm them. On short notice, Vatic is invited to a US military base in Germany, where he assumes his role will be strictly advisory. Upon arrival, he's surprised to find out that he has to undergo basic military training. During the training, you learn the fundamentals of stealth, weapons firing, and climbing. Although a bit rudimentary, the training is an effective means of incorporating a more robust tutorial level seamlessly into the narrative without coming off as too forced or contrived. Later at the briefing, the Colonel informs Vatic that he's been co-opted onto the Winter Ice team at the recommendation of Jane Wilde, a civilian advisor for the military who claims to have precognitive abilities. Vatic is not impressed with the military's association with Miss Wilde, given his skepticism towards anything paranormal, and is reluctant to join the squad on their mission to Siberia. In most of these beginning scenes, he's shown to have an inquisitive mind, and is frequently challenging the powers that be about the grounds for venturing on such a politically dangerous mission. Unfortunately, his argumentative behaviour makes him come off as a pretentious jackass to the rest of the Winter Ice team. Before we get to see if he agrees to join the mission to Russia, we're thrown back to a bold, bruised Vatic in the elevator. As he stumbles out, we are immediately greeted by a guard aiming his gun at us. As the man barks orders, Vatic attempts to calm him down before being suddenly hit with an overwhelming headache. The pain grows more intense, and he convulses, falling to his knees, head in his hands. The guard threatens to shoot if Vedek doesn't stop, but then some kind of tear in the fabric of reality emerges from Vedek's right hand and blasts right through the guard. He flies backwards, and the scene cuts to the guard on the floor, dead, blood oozing from his body. Congratulations, you've just earned a new ability, the Psi Pulse Attack. The game does a great job at depicting the sheer horror of what it might be like to possess psychic powers. Usually when Vedek learns a new ability, he unintentionally ends up hurting or killing someone in the process. Consider his telekinesis for example. What starts off as a nifty tool to hurl objects around to frighten and distract people, eventually develops into a terrifying offensive power that lifts people into the air and chokes the life right out of them. While there is little visible remorse from Vedek as he massacres his way towards the truth, there are touches sprinkled throughout the story that makes it clear the developers wanted players to consider the consequences of their actions. Right after killing the guard near the beginning of the game, you have the option to check the computer terminal the man was looking at. Apparently, he was in the middle of a chat with his wife before Vedek intruded on their conversation. The last recorded entries include the guard telling her he needed to pick up groceries on his way home from work, and her telling him how much she misses and loves him. Then, as a result of your interjection, she begins to worry and asks what's wrong. She sees you've logged back in, and after getting no response from whom she presumes is her husband, she finishes the message by saying they can meet up later. The sad thing is, she doesn't realise that her husband is dead, and the person she's chatting with is the man who killed him. Small moments like this works to humanise the enemies and really adds to the whole experience. There's a morality aspect to the game that shows up through the various stats that feature after you complete a mission. It's essentially a karma meter that tallies how many enemies you've killed and how many you've avoided entirely. So at the very least, you are encouraged to approach the levels stealthily and not kill everyone in sight. In the third stage, experimentation, Vedek makes his way to a patient's records room to see what he can uncover about winter ice. When searching for information on himself and his teammates, he sees that Jane was killed in action and then starts to remember what really happened. We again flash back to 6 months ago with a younger Vedek in Siberia. The team is heading towards a pipeline station where they hope to garner more information about a Professor Viktor Grienko and his psychic research. A few kilometers from the station, they are ambushed by unknown troops, and Vedek and Jane become separated from the rest of the group. They are soon cornered, but Vedek risks his life and ends up saving Jane before help finally arrives. When Vedek's mind returns him to the present, the computer now records that Jane survived, but was incarcerated after being diagnosed with schizophrenia. Vedek is understandably confused, and the player is left with the impression that the protagonist isn't just seeing the past through his recovered memories, but is somehow influencing history. Since he had saved Jane's life, it strangely prevented her from being dead in this present timeline. It's as if Vedek is changing past events with the knowledge he has of the future. This is a running story thread throughout Second Sight, and appears several times whenever Vedek uncovers something important from his forgotten past. Later on, after reconnecting with Jane, she tells John the Colonel was killed during the Siberia assignment, and asks why he doesn't know, as he was there when it happened. This ignites something within, and Vedek experiences another vision where he can interfere with the outcome so that the Colonel is still alive. It seems the developers wanted to drive home the idea that the player-controlled actions of the past Vedek have consequences in the present, therefore allowing a unique interaction between the player and the narrative, as the protagonist's destiny is repeatedly changed. Of course, this is not to say that you cannot fail any of the missions taking place in the past. If an ally dies during one of the stages in Russia, then an Enigma ending will play. These are a series of unsettling game over cutscenes, where Vedek will wake up in a mirrored room, heavily drugged, whilst being interrogated by someone he cannot see. They seem to take place at the opening medical facility, and are tied to the failure of a specific level. For example, if Jane is killed in fieldwork, then a digitally distorted voice will mock Vedek from behind a one-way mirror, scolding him for his weakness. The voice will accuse Vedek that he resented Jane and wanted her dead. These scenes get progressively more terrifying if you fail the later Russia levels.
Oh, God.
That's right. They're all dead.
You did that?
No, you're just confused. You don't remember, so you're making it up.
You're lying. I know who I am.
That's understandable. But you have to face up to the responsibility of what you have done.
No!
Did you see that? The table moved, and he wasn't touching it.
What's especially disturbing about this scene, apart from Vadok being shown photographs of his bullet-ridden comrades, is how the camera is cleverly used to make it look as though he's being tortured by his own reflection. The psychological torment he is put through in these Enigma endings gives us an insight into how Vadok was reduced to the frightened mess of a man we see at the start of the game, running around trying to piece everything together. Second Sight delves into the human psyche and expects players to fully embrace the madness which comes with being an accused psycho killer with powers. As I said before, while you are somewhat encouraged to not blithely murder your way through hordes of enemies, you are increasingly likely to use your psychic abilities in some horrific but inventive ways, simply because you can. It's up to the player to decide how they wish to control Vadok. If you want to possess enemies and have them brutally slaughter each other, you're free to do that. If you want to carefully sneak past people with your telepathic charm, you can do that also. Depending on how violent you choose to be during gameplay, the player can essentially make a seemingly sane protagonist look like he's lost his grip on reality. This idea is toyed around with early on by the developers, who mischievously hide a machine gun in the second tutorial level. If you are caught with the gun by an NPC on your way to the training ground, he'll demand you give it up to him. If however you choose to smuggle it onto the course, you can go on a killing spree until you are gunned down by a swarm of soldiers. This results in another Enigma sequence, which is shown whenever Vadok murders an ally.
Where am I?
Just what did you think you would do? What made you think you could get away with it? What made you think you could get away with just shooting people? Let me help you.
Insanity is an important theme in the game, which is depicted in several key ways. Firstly, it's explored through Vadok's journey to discover the truth about himself and uncover the conspiracy against him. Unfortunately, in pursuit of his goals, he ultimately becomes disconnected from the world and falls into dark, consuming impulses due to his growing collection of godlike powers. Towards the late stages of the game, Vadok becomes every bit the serial killer his captors had accused him of being. Even if you decided to tranquilize every enemy up to this point, Vadok still has blood on his hands from the people he killed during some of the cutscenes. Moreover, the developers even put a guard into the game who is allergic to the solution from your tranquilizer pistol, so he ends up dying regardless of whether or not you tried a seemingly non-lethal method. Insanity is also illustrated through the world itself. One level literally has you break into a mental asylum in search of Jane. In this stage, you'll be breaching an eerie gothic-like building during a thunderstorm, whilst avoiding guards, doctors and patients alike. There's a real creepy atmosphere to this portion of the game that is complemented by an excellent soundtrack as you sneak through hospital wards and down these long, spine-tingling corridors, all the while inching closer to the woman you hope will provide some much-needed answers. Finally reaching Jane, Vadok sees she's completely lost her wits and can barely form a sentence. She's in a very distressed and unstable state, but he's able to calm her down and escorts her to safety over the rooftops and courtyards of the asylum. When Jane regains her composure, she gives Vadok the address for the Colonel's apartment in New York. Vatic finds Stark in his apartment and learns from him the secret of Grianko's research and the conspiracy behind it all. The main antagonist is revealed to be Hansen, the director of the US National Security Executive, who intends to use Grianko's research into special children with paranormal abilities in order to create an army of psychic super soldiers. Vatic then goes to confront Hansen in his office, but is quickly faced with a no-win situation.
Ah, Dr. Vatic. Finally. You've been giving us quite a runaround, haven't you?
I know everything, Hansen.
No? What do you really know, Dr. Vatic?
I know what you did in Dubrensk. And I know what's going on here.
Research and development, Dr. Vatic. Disciplined inquiry leading to practical results. They had no idea of the potential in Russia. We're simply taking things a step further.
Further? You slaughtered those people!
No, I think you're a little confused. We know what really happened in Dubrensk, don't we? You and Stark's mercenaries running around murdering innocent children. You lost control!
No!
And how do you explain what you've done now? The bodies you've stepped over to get here?
I just want to stop this.
Stop it? Oh, don't make me laugh. You're the very reason it has succeeded.
No, I'm the reason it's gonna end.
Oh, please. Do you really think I would have allowed you to escape unintentionally? Your little runaround was nothing more than a test. And your performance was better than even I had hoped for. But now the experiment has come to its end. And so have you.
I'm stronger than you think, Hansen.
Perhaps. But it makes no difference. You can't stop us now. We have samples all over the country. You're too late.
Sample? They were people!
Oh, suffer the little children. Well, what are you going to do? Kill me?
You see, Vatic. The cards have been dealt, and I hold the winning hand. You can't change the past.
You're wrong, Hansen.
Abruptly, the scene fades to black before transitioning to a flashback of a younger Vatic who had infiltrated Grianko's underground lab alone to save the children. Although it's left ambiguous as to who was shot, I suspect it was Vatic due to the way the scene is composed. The quick cut to the floor and the sound of the gunshot going off, followed by Jane's terrified scream, all point to Vatic being killed in that moment, whilst he was suffering another one of his flashback migraines. In any case, it's now up to the younger Vatic in Dubrensk to try to stop Hansen and change history once more. This brings us to the final chapter in this story, an episode that provides a twist as mesmerising as it is psychologically thrilling, a reveal so surprising that it left me stunned for several minutes during my first playthrough, as my mind reeled at the implications. As Vatic makes his way through the base's lower levels, the flashback is interrupted by a series of flash forwards, showing the various outcomes Vatic had prevented thus far via his actions in the earlier flashbacks. It's during these sequences when Vatic comes to a startling revelation.
John, you've got to understand, you're not really here. What do you mean? This is not the present. This is a possible future. But I've been here already. John, don't lose yourself. Stay focused. Remember where you really are. In the Zener base, under Dubrensk. You must stop Hansen.
John, this is your final power. Precognition. Don't you see? The ability to know what is going to happen. And if you know what is going to happen, then you can stop it.
You can't change the past.
You're so wrong, Hansen. This isn't the past. It's the present.
Right here, Second Sight elevates itself from a great story to an exceptional one, as all the loose plot threads come together in one satisfying reveal. Vatic can't change the past because he was never travelling back in time to begin with. What he understood to be his past is really his present. This means that his excursions in the medical facility, the insane asylum, and the NSE headquarters are merely possible futures and are a manifestation of Vatic's precognition ability. These are just visions of a bad ending that will happen unless Vatic acts and completes his mission in Siberia. What's also brilliant about this twist though is that it's alluded to in the game's title and the protagonist's name. Second Sight is another name for precognition, and the word Vatic in Latin means prophet or seer. Now this obviously raises some interesting questions, like why the present Vatic never shows any indication he's receiving precognitive visions at any point during the Siberia sections until the final chapter of the game. Approaching this logically, it's possible that his future visions mostly manifest while he's asleep, so he can just dismiss them as dreams. It's also likely his psychic powers have had such an impact on his mental state that he's completely lost his sense of self. His mind has become so twisted and warped out of shape, he's blurred the line between present and future to the point where he can no longer recognize which is which anymore. And yet, despite the strain these visions have placed on Vatic's splintered mind, they nevertheless appear to have strengthened his character. In the possible future, he goes from a scared amnesiac to a serious and collected man who walks right into the antagonist's office, teeming with special agents wanting to kill him. His success and failures during these visions have hardened his resolve in the present. Vatic stops being a reluctant and arrogant tag-along in the Siberia mission, and eventually proves himself to be a confident, capable member of the Winter Ice team. While he starts off as a skeptic of psychic phenomena, he eventually accepts it when forced to face the fact he too possesses abnormal powers that he's been suppressing for most of his life. By the time Vatic is ready to confront Hansen, he is once again put into a seemingly unwinnable position, with the antagonist taunting him from behind a psi-proof window. Hansen summons his forces, but Vatic releases the captured Xena children to aid him. Together they are able to fend off many waves of soldiers, and after a long shootout, they combine their efforts to dislodge the metal frame holding the glass. With the glass broken, the corrupt corporate leader meets his fate at the hands of the children who tear him apart and eat him alive. John is then airlifted out by US Marines, along with Jane and the Colonel. Yet far from feeling triumphant, Vatic is rather solemn in these closing moments. The whole ordeal has left a lasting mark. Although he's managed to prevent a terrible future from coming true and saved many lives, including those of his teammates and the children, it's clear the things he saw in his visions have traumatized him. No doubt it will take time to heal those mental wounds he's suffered. But one has to wonder, is this really it? Are the team and the children really safe now? It's very possible the US government will try to continue what Hansen started if they discover what he was up to in Russia. The ending is bittersweet, which I think is appropriate for a game with a somber tone like this. Second Sight is a timeless gem that deserves to be remembered. Sure, it has its shortcomings, and can be a little rough around the edges. The animations are clunky at times, and the camera can occasionally work against you, but these minor grievances don't detract from the superb delivery of a gripping story, incredible soundtrack, and visuals that were great for its time. But let me know what you think of the game. Were you as impressed with its story and presentation as I was? As always, feel free to leave a comment. Also, if you're new here, consider subscribing, as your support goes a long way to help grow the channel. Wishing you all the very best for the rest of your day.